My background in the martial arts started when I was 7 years old. My father's Greg Morris from the original Mission Impossible series. And in that series, they showed some of the first karate moves, martial arts moves, and executions ever shown in television. This was 1966. And my dad and several of the other actors went to a man named Bruce Tegner, who was one of the first GIs to bring the martial arts back from Okinawa to the United States. He was our first martial arts instructor. So here I am, 7 years old, going with my father to these classes. I loved it. I thought it was exotic. I thought it was exciting. I was an athlete, so it made sense to me. I was a little tiny, so I got a lot of bruises and I got beat up quite a bit, but it was intriguing to me, and I must have stuck it out for a good year and a half or so before I literally, honestly, wanted to watch cartoons on a Saturday morning more than I wanted to train. And it was pretty bananas, but I bounced out of there. I think I got a blue belt from Mr. Tegner, and then I went on to Master Bong Soo-han after that. He was a great Hapkido master. He was the choreographer of the Billy Jack films with Tom Laughlin. I mean, he was a very difficult taskmaster, and I learned quite a bit. I actually got knocked down my first few times when I thought I was getting too big and too good, and Mr. Shigezani, who was one of his top students and top instructors, brought me out on the mat and was sparring with me, and I did my traditional spin move, and he dropped me like a bad habit. And I'm sucking air on the ground, and that was one of my greatest lessons in the martial arts. But I was always intrigued with Bruce Lee, as we all were at that time. It was the 70s. He was mad popular. We'd never seen anything like him before. He was so dynamic and a great-looking Chinese man leading these movies, and every movie that came out, we couldn't wait to rush to the theater to see them. But I had no idea how to study Wing Chun. I knew Wing Chun was his mother art. I knew that was his home style. But nobody in LA that I knew taught Wing Chun. One day it's raining out in LA, and I drive by this building, it says Wing Chun. I drive in immediately. I didn't care if it was open or not open. I get to the door, I ring the doorbell. This diminutive Asian man walks down, opens the door. How can I help you? I'd love to study Wing Chun. Really? Okay, come in. So I came inside. This was Sifu Haka. He says to me, "You're 6'1". I'm not. How do you think I would handle you?" I said, "I don't know. I really don't know." He goes, "Well, I would shoot you, of course. I would just take a gun and shoot you." And then he starts laughing. He's like, "I'm just here to tell you, Wing Chun is about whatever it takes." From that moment on, I've been his dedicated student ever since. That was 1987. Well, I'm very happy that they're doing the Ip Man movies. Very, very honored that they would even highlight our Grand Master, because I believe that he's been lost a little bit in the history of the great martial artists. Because some others are just more dynamic. I mean, some other stories are just more flamboyant. And we as a people love myth. Ip Man was real, you know, a real man with a real time, and he was not concerned with promoting himself. He was not concerned with necessarily promoting Wing Chun to the world, just to his people, his students. So he was very private, very closed door. Our Sifu, very similar to that. He never wanted to be linked with Bruce Lee as Bruce Lee's buddy. He knew he was Bruce Lee's buddy. Nobody else needed to know that. So now in seeing these movies, I didn't know Ip Man was that bad a dude, honestly. You know, that's the bad dude right there. So it's nice to see a little bit of that legend being told. I think that the choreography is brilliant. I think it is Donnie Yin's best film, you know, as an actor and as a martial artist, because I'm privy to that particular system. I know a lot of his work. I've seen a lot of his movies. I think it's a wonderful performance. I think it's a wonderful rendition of a man known as Ip Man. I can explain the lineage to the extent that I know it. It is well chronicled. I mean, and I think as the movies Yip Man come out, more people are going to want to know, more people are going to come forward, and you're going to see more cross-references of students of Yip Man and then the students of the students of the students of the students. We can start back from Ung Mui, who was the only Buddhist nun at the Shaolin Temple, who kind of distilled the five family styles into what we know as Wing Chun. She left the temple, was one of the few to escape when it was destroyed, one of many temples. And legend has it again, was residing in the woods and came across this young woman, Yim Wing Chun, who she taught this system to. Again, legend has it, to stop her from being married by this bandit. Tell him you'll marry him in a year, the legend says. I will teach you what I know. Then challenge him to a match. He will laugh it off, and you will beat him. Legend has it, he came back. She bested him. He left. Then she went on and taught her husband, who taught her sons. And then it was passed down to Shun Wai Shun, who was the money changer. And from there to Yip Man, who was a young boy when he started to train. And legend has it again that he was very much, excuse the expression, piss and vinegar. He wanted to know. He wanted to fight. He had the money to pay for the lessons, which is what it took. And Shun Wai Shun took him and humbled him and gave him the true lessons of Wing Chun. And I think that through that, Yip Man understood the essence of this system, that it wasn't about the system, it was about you and who you were. And he became an incredible practitioner, obviously one of the greatest the world has ever seen. And as that lineage goes forward, my Sifu falls into that line. He's a direct disciple from Yip Man. From his later years, after he came from Fushan to Hong Kong, that's when Sifu Hawkins met with Yip Man. So Yip Man was a much older man at the time, had his fights and his bouts and his experience. So I think he was more in his reflective state. And so he was more philosophical about the art and was looking for young men like Hawkins, Sifu, like Bruce Lee, to promote this art. I'm very, very, very fortunate to be a direct disciple of Sifu Hawkins Chun. In the beginning, Sifu was very aggressive. His teaching methods were very aggressive. He was a much younger man, a much more vital man, and his attitude, as anybody who knows Hawkins will tell you, is ferocious. It's a take no prisoners attitude. And that's how he taught us. And that's what we learned. A lot of us were just mad dogs, especially the students that started before I did. People like Sifu Phil Romero from Albuquerque, Wally Nakagawa. Those guys were hardcore. And you'd walk out with bruises on your chest, bruises on your arms, your forearms would be hammered and toe up. Because they were about what works. How do we make this happen and come alive? They weren't what I call dutiful students in that they're trying to be perfect in their execution and try to follow everything their Sifu does. No, they were like their Sifu. They needed to experiment and make sure that these techniques worked out there, not just here, but out there. So we trained really hard in here to make sure that it was clean and we could survive out there. And I asked him one time, I said, Sifu, why do people love the flowery, lyrical way, and they're not as interested in the direct, effective method? He said an interesting thing. He says, Philip, people love magic. They love magic. They want to know that people can jump 30 feet in the air. They want to feel as though they can, rise on a breeze and float through the air. It can't happen, but they want it. So sometimes that's what you have to teach them, because that's what they will accept. They won't accept. It's hard. Fighting's hard. Fighting is difficult. It takes courage more than skill on many levels. And Sifu's philosophy is that, if it's anything, it's that you need courage to study this art. You need intelligence to study Wing Chun. Wing Chun has 3 empty hand forms, wooden dummy form, 6.5-point pole, and the butterfly swords. That's it. The forms that we have are not fighting application forms. They are forms to inform you. They're the dictionary of the system. so that you understand the tools that you are using and you sharpen those tools and you use those tools out in the street. But it is not in any set way or pattern or form, because fights don't happen that way. They're nasty, they're dirty, they're ugly, they're violent. And that's not what people, most people I would say, want from their martial arts. They don't want to get hurt. They got to go to work tomorrow. They don't want to get hurt. They got to go to the office. Sifu is about, you don't want to get hurt, you probably aren't going to be a good student for me. Because that's what's going to happen here. You're going to walk out of here, you're going to be hurting, you're going to be tired, you're going to be gassed, because that's what it takes. The system requires that. Sifu's philosophy is, the system requires that you do this. It's not me. It's what it requires. He knows it from his experience in fighting. He knows it from his experience with Yip Man. He knows it from his experience in Hong Kong. It's up to me now, as Phil Morris in Los Angeles in this day and age, to figure out who I am in it. That's Sifu's philosophy. I can speak on the relationship between the great Grand Master Yip Man and Sifu Hawkins to an extent. To the extent that I understand it through my own Sifu. I'm here because I love him, Sifu Hawkins. He's taught me a great many things in my life. Beyond martial arts. Excuse me. I truly feel that that's the way he felt about Yip Man. Yip Man taught him as a man, as a student of great ability, yes, but a student who was a man and had a life to live. So that his relationship with Yip Man, I believe, is very similar to mine with him. Like a father figure in a way, but a tough father figure. And I think that they related to each other on an intellectual level, both very proud of their Chinese heritage. Yip Man loved that Sifu and Bruce Lee and Wang Chunlong and William Chung went out to fight on rooftops and to pit their skill against others. I think Yip Man adored those guys for that. They were the real students, I think, in his mind. And Sifu stayed and humbled himself to complete the system under Yip Man. You know, that was his only Wing Chun instructor. Respect is given when respect is earned. And I think that respect from Yip Man to Sifu Hawkins came out of what Sifu Hawkins earned. Not just going and paying him for lessons, which certainly he was able to do, but to take the teachings and express them in a way that was pleasing to Grandmaster Yip Man. That's the highest compliment you can give a teacher, is in taking the teachings, making them your own, and elevating them within yourself. And Sifu Hawkins, to my mind and to my experience, has certainly done that. And that would make any teacher, any father, any professor proud. Well, Sifu has two sides to his personality, as he has two sides to his martial arts expression. Initially, he was what he would term a mad dog, right? Rabid. He was fierce. He's not a big guy. He had to be, to kind of overcome the physical limitations when he came up against a bigger opponent. He was ferocious. He is ferocious. He was so ferocious that one of his instructors, I don't know if it was Yip Man, I don't know, told him he needed to take Tai Chi. He needed to calm down. He needed to ease the mind. So Sifu started to study Tai Chi, and it informed him more about his Wing Chun. You know, so I think that's where his traditional side is intact, but his flow comes from something other than just straight Wing Chun, because his flow is magical. He does things that I'm always marveling at to this day. I believe that Yip Man was very particular about who he taught. and how much information he would give you based on your background. I think that was a very real thing then. I think then cultural pride was everything. I mean, the Chinese were an incredibly oppressed people for many, many, many years, centuries in some regards. And so when they developed their martial arts, it became a source of proprietary stakes. This is ours. This is what we use to survive against y'all. You know what I'm saying? So, and I get that. I get it. I'm very culturally proud. So I understand and I respect it. And I think that Yip Man definitely had that going on. It may have been some of the reason why Bruce wasn't taken as firmly into the fold later, because he was open and he was diverse and he understood that he had to be inclusive. The world is an inclusive place. So I want to include these things. It informs me about me. Sifu Hawkins is similar to Bruce Lee. I think he's probably a bit of a hybrid between Bruce Lee and Yip Man, because Sifu's a very, very culturally proud man as well. So yeah, I think they're discerning more than they're biased. They discern, you're worthy of what I have. What I have is a gift. I'm not just going to give it to anybody. You have to be worthy of it. And I think here in this studio, that's no different. Doesn't matter if you're Chinese or Japanese or Korean or black or Asian or whatever. If you're deserving, if you've shown the capacity to learn what I'm putting down, I'll give you some more. And if you're not, it doesn't matter if I give it to you or not. You won't be able to do it. The teachings that Yip Man presented to Sifu Hawkins, we all have seen. Sifu stands on no ceremony. There are no secrets. It wouldn't matter if he told them to you. The question, as he always says, is, can you do this? I can give everything to you. That doesn't mean that you have it. I've been with this man, Phil Morris has been with Sifu Hawkins Chung for 22 years this year. I don't have it. I don't have his stuff. I don't know anybody who has his stuff. The matches that we know as the rooftop matches are real. It's not legend, it's not myth. They actually happened. And they were for a very salient purpose, and that's to find out what worked, what didn't work. How do we approach a Choi Li foot guy? How do we approach a Western boxer? How do we approach it with our skills? This studio, the studio that Yip Man had, they're like a laboratory. And in the laboratory, experiments are conducted. That's known as training. Those experiments are very clean within the laboratory. Not so much when you go out to the street. And that's what they needed. You know, we train, I don't want to hurt you. You're my brother, you know. I may want to best you, but I don't want to hurt you, ideally. Out in the street, no rules, no laws. And they did them on rooftops so that it was away from the prying eyes of the police or the general public who might call the police on them. So they were above the city, hammering each other out. Sifu has some of that footage. I've seen some of that footage. I've seen guys get knocked down. Literally, no gloves, no refs, bam, you're out. Now they would stop, okay? They wouldn't jump on him and keep beating him. I mean, they were civilized to a degree, because when one man was down, they were down. And that was it. Incontrovertible. I don't have to tell you. I don't have to talk to you about who's better. We know. I'm standing, you're not. So those matches were legitimate, they were ongoing, and they served a very real purpose. And I think it helped to move the system of Wing Chun forward, because then everybody knew how effective it was. One other thing I will say about that is that when Sifu and Bruce Lee and Wang Shulong and everybody would come back to tell Yip Man what happened, you know, Yip Man would be like, well, what techniques did you use? And Sifu would say, oh, we used the crash from Choi Li foot. We didn't use the Bong Sao or the Jun Choi punches. We used something else, you know. And he was so happy because he knew that if they used Wing Chun techniques and somebody got hurt and went to the hospital, they would say, well, who hit you? They would say, oh, it was Hawkins Chung. He was a student of Yip Man over in Kowloon or wherever, wherever. And so then they would be in trouble. But when they told Yip Man that they used a different technique than the Wing Chun techniques, the Yip Man was so happy because nobody would, they wouldn't come to his door. Sifu Hawkins loved Bruce Lee, loved him like a brother, loved him like a brother. And I think that Bruce Lee loved him like a brother as well. Bruce was a child star and didn't have a lot of people who related to him as just Bruce Lee. It's just Bruce. Sifu was one of those few who did. He didn't care one whit, doesn't care now about who you are, how much money you have, what you do. I mean, I'm on TV all the time. I do a lot of stuff. He treats me, he tells me if I don't get it, leave. If I don't get it, I can't be your student. You know what I mean? That's me, and I've been here 22 years. So he doesn't stand on ceremony with anybody. And he definitely didn't stand on ceremony with Bruce Lee. So when I'm telling you now that he loved Bruce Lee and he thought he was an amazing martial artist and was honored when Bruce Lee would communicate with him about the evolution of his own martial arts, because our teacher was going through his own evolution at the same time. He incorporated Japanese karate at a time when it was very unfashionable for a Chinese martial artist who was accomplished in one system to go to a Japanese system. Well, Sifu needed to know. He wanted to know what that aggression was about. I told you he studied Tai Chi. He needed to know. He needed to balance his spirit with the search. And he respected Bruce Lee's search. And Bruce Lee searched unlike any martial artist then or since. And that, to Sifu Hawkins Chung, is an incredible honor. And he always expresses to us how much he respected Bruce Lee. He always expresses to us that Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do was Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do. Is it for everybody? No. But it was for Bruce Lee. It was the outgrowth of his own nature. That's a very organic and real thing. And Sifu Hawkins Chung has mad love for him. The teaching of Wing Chun to Bruce Lee and Sifu Hawkins occurs pretty simultaneously when they start, the genesis of it all. And they went through their paces fairly together up to the point that Bruce left Hong Kong and went to America. At that point, I think Bruce had studied for maybe 5 or 6 years, something like that. Which isn't, I mean, it's enough time to learn the entire system. It is certainly enough time to learn the entire system, but it isn't enough time to master many parts of the system. So he may have been fairly incomplete when he left, but he was not an incomplete fighter. I mean, he was a very accomplished fighter, and Sifu Hawkins has insane respect for Bruce Lee as an athlete, as a martial artist, as a Wing Chun guy. The difference is that Sifu Hawkins stayed in Hong Kong. He was there with Yip Man. Now, the two of them, Bruce Lee and Sifu Hawkins, didn't train at Yip Man together. They would make sure that their schedules were staggered so that they didn't know the full depth of each person's skill. It's very savvy. I mean, these are competitive, aggressive guys. They don't want you to know their secret stuff, right? So there was that going on. So who knows in those private, semi-private lessons what Yip Man divulged to Bruce and what Yip Man divulged to Sifu Hawkins. I don't know those things. But I do know that Hawkins stayed in Hong Kong a little bit longer than Bruce Lee did, and then he came back to Hong Kong after he went to Australia to go to school. So he came back to Hong Kong, learned the entire system with with Grandmaster Yip Man. I do not know if Bruce did that. I know that the stories say that he came back and tried to tape Yip Man doing the wooden dummy and completing the system, to which I think he was not welcome. So that says a little bit that he wasn't completely as versed in the system as he could have been. But again, I defy anybody to say Bruce Lee was not a talented, as gifted and as talented a martial artist as we've ever seen. Whether he had 5 years of Wing Chun, 2 years, 20 years, 25 years, it doesn't matter. that's his heart. He was there, I'll put it this way. Bruce Lee was there long enough to get the spirit of Wing Chun. The guys who are there 30 years don't get it.
我想跟你學拳，要幾多錢？
係。你叫咩名啊？
我叫李小龍。
哦，你咩時間想學拳啊？
見到唔順眼嘅人，我就要打佢。
咁架勢？
Now, I don't know if Bruce Lee stood outside the Chun and turned students away, saying that Yip Man was not feeling well, and then, like, cool, got him, and then went inside and learned some stuff. But I wouldn't put it past him. That's a clever guy. Let me tell you something. Anybody who learns Wing Chun up to a point has got to be real clever. They have got to be savvy, or else you're just going to bone out. The system doesn't hold it for you if you don't bring something to it yourself. Obviously, Bruce Lee and Sifu Hawkins brought a lot of their own individual character to it. If that was Bruce Lee's character, which I understand it was, I would tend to think that story is probably true on many occasions, So, and good for him. If those are the tricks of his trade and they fell for it, bad for them, good for him.
等你大個啲，再返嚟搵過我啦，嚇。
Is there pure Wing Chun? Sure, in a book. Is there pure Wing Chun? Sure, in philosophy. Is there pure Wing Chun in the street? No such animal. The street will not allow you to be pure. The street encourages you to get dirty. And in that, the best Wing Chun students that I've seen are the ones that are willing to get dirty. Do they know the technique purely? Sometimes. Sometimes. But the best are the ones who can apply it effectively. And that's what our Sifu has done. That's what the greatest martial artist that we've ever known, Bruce Lee, did. I trained years and years and years and years to do it Sifu's way. Well, I'm not 5'4" and 110 pounds. I'm 6'1", 180. So as soon as I got that I couldn't scrunch myself into this little ball to imitate him, I started to become myself. And then the system buoyed that evolution in me. I was like, oh, wow, that's what that means. Oh, my goodness, that's how that's supposed to be executed. Because I was executing it on my level, with my skills, with my dimensions, with my physicality. The system allows for that. That's why it doesn't teach you how to fight in the forms. That's why it doesn't lock you into a predisposed mentality. Sifu Hawkins says to me, Philip, I do not know how to fight until I am fighting. I do not hold in my head that you do this, I do that, you do that, I do this, you do this, you do this. No. What if I'm wrong? Then I get beat. So I allow for there to be nothing. You ask me a question, I answer that question with the tools of Wing Chun, the way I know them. I ask you enough questions, can you answer those? Possibly not. So the limit of your knowledge breaks off at the point you can no longer answer those questions. I'm not here for trophies. I'm not here for belts. People ask me all the time, are you a black belt? I hear you study martial arts. Are you a black belt in karate? And I go, no, I study Wing Chun Kung Fu. Well, are you, what are you? What level are you? I said, I just do it. I've taught people, so some might consider me a Sifu. I don't. I'm just I'm a rank and file member of the system, man. I'm trying to learn today a little bit more than I learned yesterday. That's how I approach this system. Sifu Hawkins teaches me as what I like to call a natural man, not an automaton, not a robot. When he's teaching me in a class, I think he's only talking to me. I'm sure every other person feels the same way. They feel like, wow, he's got to be talking to me because that means so much to me. Well, we all feel that way. That's the kind of teacher he is. And I overlay those teachings on my life. I try to live a Kung Fu lifestyle. As an African American, and I think a lot of African Americans study martial arts because it's very similar to how the Asians were back in the day. They come from a depressed society. They come from difficult surroundings, violence everywhere, trying to find a place to belong, trying to find some sense of discipline, some sense of order, some way to deal with all of this. And they gravitated towards karate initially. Now Kung Fu, Tai Chi, many of the other arts. Life is a challenge for everybody. We need something to face those challenges. People use drugs, sex. I choose this. And I think we would be better served, ironically enough, to utilize a warrior way, a martial way, to calm our spirit. Then we would understand that violence doesn't solve any. I train this for my spirit. I try to be a better husband daily. I try to be a better father daily. I try to be a better actor daily, using the precepts that this man has taught me. He truly is my father on those levels. So the teachings that I have learned, the lessons that I have learned here, as adept physically as I may be, and I'm no more adept than any other Wing Chun stylist, where I might have a leg up is that my teacher has given me lessons based on life, not just based on fighting, not just based on my opponent being another man or another aggressor, but on my opponent maybe being that audition I have that day. My opponent being the problem that my daughter brings me when she is having difficulty with a guy she's dating. Or that my son might bring me because he's having difficulty starting his business. Or that my wife might bring me because she has had difficulty during that day. I try and empty my cup to understand their spirit. And it informs me about my own. When I practice, it informs me about me. It tells me the level that I have reached and where I need to go. And isn't that our life? Yip Man was instrumental in bringing Wing Chun out, in revealing the intricacies of this particular system. And in passing it down to someone like Sifu Hawkins, I think he did a very smart thing. Because I believe that Sifu Hawkins Chung has the spirit of Yip Man, and in turn the spirit of Wing Chun. The aggressiveness, the whatever it takes philosophy, the physical acumen and ability to express the art, the sense of its philosophy and its effectiveness and directness in accordance with his own nature, which is very direct and very real and very grounded. And so that's what he passes on to us. And if that is then carrying the torch, then that flame burns incredibly brightly.